Box is on the line with us, professional physical climatologist. He's been studying the Arctic since 1994 with the Danish Geological Survey for the last 8 years, supporting numerous climate monitoring activities. His Twitter handle is climate_ice. I've been following him for quite some time. And Dr. Box, it's great to have you back on the program. It's been a while. I'm wondering what your latest research on the Arctic tells us about what's going on with climate change around the world and how it's changing the weather patterns of our planet.
Yeah, I'm part of the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, AMAP, part of their climate expert group. And we are responsible for reviewing all of the observational records of climate of the past, what is measured. That's what we do. We focus on observations, measurements, not so much the models. And so the past 50 years, we're finding with an increasingly precise story of just how the Arctic climate is unraveling. It is the leading edge of global climate change because the Arctic is warming 3 times as fast as the rest of the world. And that is directly changing the weather patterns where most people live in the mid-latitudes. These heat domes and what the Pacific Northwest experienced, that omega pattern, that is a super wavy jet stream. The cold wave that hit Texas recently, another example of a jet stream wave or polar vortex, it's the same thing, way out of proportion and persistently stuck in positions that make drought, they can make flooding, they make cold waves. Remember, the eastern U.S. was in cold, and in D.C. they're like, "Where's the global warming?" Whereas at the same time, the west coast of the U.S. was in drought and heat wave. This wave disruption is a signature of Arctic climate change. Now, and so there's lots of details. Yeah.
Go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Well, just back to the observational records, we do these 2-year updates. We've, like I said, more precise. What's really standing out is winter warming, and that is activating the permafrost, carbon. The Arctic used to be a region of permafrost sink, of carbon sink. For tens of thousands of years, the Arctic soils are accumulating biomass and in a frozen state. And this warming, which is pronounced in winters, is activating microbial activity. It's thawing ground ice. The ice, it takes energy to heat ice, and it does nothing until it reaches 0 Celsius. And then it crosses that threshold, and you get melt, you get water ponding at the surface, which becomes a methane source to the atmosphere. Recent science that we're reviewing, observational studies demonstrate that the Arctic has become a source of carbon to the atmosphere, a warming triggered source of carbon.
It used to be a sink. Now, okay, 2 big points here. With regard to the wavy jet stream, my understanding is that when the Arctic was frozen and very, very cold up there, that basically acted like kind of a dam to hold the jet stream as this giant river of air that flows in the upper atmosphere, just circulating around the northern part of North America and the rest of the northern hemisphere in a relatively smooth fashion. And that as the Arctic has warmed up, the jet stream has stopped being this one continuous river and has started just kind of drooling all the way down to Texas and back up again, and in the process trapping heat domes and cold air masses and things like that. And that's why Texas got hit. That's why when I lived in D.C. we got hit. In fact, I think you and I talked about that on the air. And it's why, and I live in Portland now. It was 116 degrees here a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be 100 degrees this weekend. That's because the jet stream is basically falling apart. I realize I'm not using scientific terminology, but do I have all that right?
Yeah, you've got that right. You can simply count the number of waves in the polar vortex in the jet stream. And wave number 0 is a perfectly annular river with no waves. Then you get wave numbers that they're in, I think, in odd numbers. They go up, and so high wave number events are attributable directly to the Arctic heating at a faster rate. That's reducing the temperature difference that the strength of the jet stream normally depends on. But because the temperature difference, the Arctic should be colder, but it's warming faster than the rest of the world, which of course is also warming. That temperature differential relaxes. The jet stream gets into a drunken, wavy, stuck pattern, and then it can stick. The Russian heat wave of 2010 that drove global food commodity price spikes, the Pakistani floods of 2010, the August 2003 European heat wave that killed 75,000 people that weren't prepared for suddenly 5 sigma, off the charts warm anomaly. Those, we've gotten these little tastes of it, and it's kind of hard to imagine it getting worse, but it's probably going to get worse.
Well, and back when you and I first met, Leo DiCaprio and I were putting together this series of short videos with Lila Connors, Green World Rising, yeah. And they live over on YouTube. People can just easily search for them. And one of the things that we were concerned about was the idea that the Arctic could move from being a carbon sink to being a carbon source, and that if that source got into a runaway mode, that it could produce such extreme weather that it could even conceivably lead to a mass extinction event. Many people would argue that we are living in a mass extinction event, but I mean one far more serious. Sometimes this is referred to as the clathrate gun, the deep frozen methane crystals in the sea. Now, there's been we got a lot of pushback for that, and people like Michael Mann, who's a regular on this program, climate scientist, saying, we're not anywhere close to that kind of disaster scenario. I mean, wiping out major chunks of life on Earth disaster scenario. But how far away do you think we are? Or is that something that is, you're in the Arctic, you're looking at this stuff. What do you think?
So this catastrophe is in slow motion, and we are like the frogs in a heated pot. We're just not barely noticing this, and the amount of carbon that's in the permafrost exceeds the amount of biomass carbon in all of the forests of the world by a factor of 3. Wow. There's 1,000 gigatons of carbon in the Arctic permafrost. That is 2.5 times the volume of carbon that's in our atmosphere. There is now growing evidence that warming is shifting the Arctic from, again, sink into source. There are abrupt processes that are wildfire, thermokarst, lake, collapse of permafrost. These are the sort of fire and the collapse mechanisms are not in the climate models, and they're being programmed in there now. But we are looking at a future of 15 Celsius warming in the Arctic by end of century, and 25 Celsius in winter. And those projections don't have these abrupt processes in them. So the path that we're on is most definitely a catastrophic path. How soon does the world become unlivable? I think we're approaching that, right? When these wake-up calls, like the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. that was 120 Fahrenheit, shattering records. Canada, that's basically unlivable.
Yes.
at least for nature, the forests are just at the point where they light up, and so this mass extinction event that we've entered, there's no real prospects, at least in the short term, that we're going to get out of it. We have to prepare for extreme disruptions to our lives, but I don't think anyone knows, just how soon the House of, or I don't know, House of Cards, is it a House of Cards, the civilization, how soon it falls apart. I think we are resilient, right? When you put this species under threat, it acts very well to preserve its own future. But that won't come without a tremendous amount of suffering, especially for poor people who lack the resources to mitigate, or they lack that resilience.
Yeah. So you're still hopeful that we can, if there is a concerted effort around the world to stop releasing carbon into the atmosphere, that we might be able to, at the very least, slow down this freight train. We have about 30 seconds, by the way.
Well, I like the analogy of applying brakes. So we're slowing down, and so the crash becomes less hard. Mm-hmm. We have to get busy removing carbon from the atmosphere. And do that at scale efficiently. And so halting carbon emissions and removing 1,000 gigatons or 500 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere is the project of the century. And, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
But we need to get about it, yeah. Dr. Jason Box, climate_ice on Twitter.
Increased methane level in the atmosphere, which is now causing methane levels to be rising steadily and in an accelerating way, and that's increasing our rate of planetary warming because methane is such a powerful greenhouse gas. This shows methane bubbles coming up to the surface from deep down. This is some Russian data, and we're seeing now wherever we measure methane, this is a methane site in the north of Canada, we see methane levels rising. Another effect, there's too many effects to have time to talk about them all, but another one that has been recognized recently, which you've experienced, is that the Arctic, because the Arctic is warming faster than the tropics, the air mass over the Arctic Ocean is getting warmer relative to the air mass over the tropics. That temperature difference is reduced, and that reduces the strength of the wind that separates these two air masses, called the jet stream. The jet stream takes on this lobed pattern, and with a lobed pattern, you find that allows cold air to come from the Arctic to come down to lower latitudes, and warm air from the tropics to rise to higher latitudes. So in between.
As a result of the landslide, part of the NH13 route was completely washed away. Firefighters are fighting wildfires in 300 different parts of Italy. Trees are burning like torches. Thousands of people are being evacuated. Severe flooding in the Joshen area. Flooding in Kerch. Hail in the area in Lomas del Paradero. A terrible storm hit the United States. Storm, sandstorm and flooding in Aleppo. At least 44 people have died in flooding in Turkey's northern Black Sea region. Flooding in Hiroshima.